Scholomance Academy is here, and that means it's time to review these Shaman cards. First up, we have Rune Dagger. This is a 2-mana 1/3 weapon. After your hero attacks, gain spell damage +1. I think this card is actually quite good, probably a 4 out of 5, and yet I don't see the decks that support it. Right now, a spell damage Shaman just doesn't seem like it's going to be a good deck to me, maybe tier 3 at best. And then this could also work in a control Shaman as it would buff up AoE spells, but I don't really see a control Shaman being able to compete in this meta either. So for that reason, I think I'm actually going to give it a 1 out of 5 in terms of meta relevance, as I just don't think this is a good archetype. Moving along, we have Molten Blast. This is a 3-mana spell that will deal 2 damage and summon a 1/1 for each damage that it dealt. So if you did 3 damage, you'd have 3 1/1s. If you did 4 damage, you'd have 4 1/1s, etc. There are 1/1 elementals, by the way. I think this card is pretty good if you curve it out with Rune Dagger, so you're going to get a 3/3 and you deal 3 damage. That's a solid card, like you would want to play that card. However, that's not always what you're going to get, and can you consistently have enough spell damage for this to be better than basically like only 2 damage and a 2/2? Because a 3-mana 2/2 deal 2 damage, I just don't think that's that playable right now. So for that reason, I think this is going to be a 2 out of 5 in card quality and a 1 out of 5 in meta relevance. I don't think this is good enough. Next up, we have the 8-mana spell Tidal Wave. This deals 3 damage to all minions and it has lifesteal. This card is interesting. With the 2-mana 2/4 Artificer guy, this could heal you up to full with a single spell, and for that reason, I think you would probably run a copy of this in Control Shaman. However, I don't see Control Shaman working next expansion. I don't think it's going to be very good, so this card is a bit strange. Plus, I do think there's an argument for the healing that's on this card might just be, you know, better if you played a cheaper AoE that cleared damage earlier so you didn't have to heal in the first place. Like, if you think about it, 8 mana is very, very expensive, and if you had, say, a 5-mana AoE, you could clear a board and not take the 10 damage or whatever that you need to heal back when you use this. Plus, it does affect your own minions, which can be a big downside unless you're a control deck. So yeah, I'm not blown away by this. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 in terms of card quality, as I could see it being run in the future, but I'm going to give it a 1 out of 5 in terms of meta relevance. Next up, we have Trick Totem. This is a 2-mana 0/3 totem that will randomly cast a spell every turn that costs 3 or less. I think this card is pretty solid, and I definitely think you would run this in Totem Shaman. I think someone did the math on Reddit, and it was something like 70% of the time the spell is going to be a positive, and that is more than enough for this to be worth running. It's a 0/3 instead of a 0/2, which is already pretty decent health for the mana. So I think this is just a good card. I think you run this. I think most of the time it gives you something good. Sometimes you get like Totemic Reflection or something crazy. But yeah, solid card. It's going to be in Totem Shaman, I think, which is going to be the only viable archetype for Shaman. And for that reason, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5 in overall card quality and a 3 out of 5 in meta relevance. Next up, we have Primordial Studies. This is a 1-mana spell that will discover a spell damage minion, and your next spell damage minion costs 1 less. I think this card is okay. You know, realistically, a lot of the spell damage minions that you could discover, because you're able to discover and not get them randomly, there are a handful of pretty good ones. But that being said, I still don't really see this being good enough to run it. I don't think Spell Damage Shaman is going to be that good either. So for that, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 in overall card quality and a 1 out of 5 in terms of meta relevance. Moving along, we have Speaker Guidra. This is a 3-mana 1/4 with Spell Burst, gain attack and health equal to this spell's cost. So if you played this with a 2-mana spell, you would get a 3/6, which is quite good with Rush and Wind Fury. However, the problem with this in Shaman is there just aren't that many good spells that you're going to run this with. I think this could work in a control list, but again, I don't think a control list is going to work in general. So then you have to ask, is this going to work in something more aggressive like a Totem Shaman? And you know, a lot of the best cards in Totem Shaman cost like 1 or even 0 mana, and that's not even going to buff this at all. This is this weird case of this card being very, very strong, like 4 out of 5 in card quality, but maybe even just a 1 in terms of meta relevance. I'm not seeing where this fits, and I just can't see it being put in Totem Shaman or Control Shaman working. So 1 star, guys. Moving along, we have Instructor Fireheart. This is a 3-mana 3/3. Discover a spell that costs 1 or more. If you play it this turn, repeat this effect. I think this card is very, very strong. This is an easy 5 out of 5, and yet do I think it will be nerfed? No, because Shaman seems like it's going to be kind of weak. I think you just put this in a lot of different decks because it's basically just a better Vulpera Scoundrel, which is the 3-mana 2/3 that lets you discover a spell, and not just like a little better, a lot better. It has better stats. You could potentially go off on a chain of cheap spells. It's just a very interesting card. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5, and then maybe a 3 out of 5 in terms of meta relevance, as I'm just not having a lot of faith in Shaman right now. Moving along, we have Rune Carvings. This is a 6-mana Druid Shaman spell that lets you choose one, summon 4 Treant totems, or overload, give them all rush. I think this card is actually better than you might think. It's fairly flexible. Sometimes one of the biggest weaknesses that Totem Shaman has is losing the board and not really having a comeback mechanism. I also think they just need a good amount of reload. Like, you know, they try to rush onto the board. If they don't get it, they kind of just don't have the tools to get back. And I think this is one of those tools. However, do I think you run 2 copies of it? Maybe not. Still, I'd give it a 3 out of 5 and a 3 out of 5 in meta relevance. I think it's just a pretty good card, and I think some people will be surprised by the fact that you need this. It reminds me of that 8-mana Druid spell where you get 5 2/2s and then another 5 2/2s. Like, it's just reload. It's just the stuff that kind of helps you push your opponent over the edge. You know, you answer it with Bloodlust, that kind of thing. So overall, pretty solid card. Moving along, we have Groundskeeper. This is a 4-mana 4/5 taunt. If you're playing a spell that's worth 5 or more, gain 5 health. I think this is a very solid anti-aggro card, and yet I just don't really see a gun control Shaman working. I don't really know if you'd run this, so I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5 in terms of card quality and a 1 out of 5 in terms of meta relevance. I don't think people are going to be playing this yet. Moving along, we have Ross, Frost Whisperer. I think this card is quite solid. I think it's basically Despicable Dreadlord. You might run it in the top end of your Shaman, Totem Shaman deck as a way to kind of fight back a bit on the board and get some extra damage in. Again, I could see it in a controlled list or something similar in the future that might work in the spell damage list. Again, maybe I'm underrating spell damage. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 across the board. Very solid card. Next up, we have Totem Goliath. This is a 5-mana 4/5 with Death Rattle. Summon all of the basic totems and you overload for 2. Again, this is a card that on the surface doesn't look that great, but it's just more reload for Totem Shaman, and I think, you know, you can just play this on 5. The stats are okay. You get the Death Rattle, now you got even more totems. They basically have to kill all the totems, otherwise they're going to get bloodlusted, even with the overload. So I think it's very expensive, but I still think you run this in Totem Shaman, and I think that's going to be like a tier 3 or even tier 2 deck, so 3 out of 5 across the board. Next up, we have Devolving Missiles. This is a 1-mana spell that will shoot 3 missiles at random enemies that transform them into minions that cost 1 less. I think this is a pretty good card. It's kind of a bit better than Earthshock in some ways, as that it's kind of a bit of a silence. You know, it could get rid of taunts, and it still costs 1 mana. So for that reason, I could see this being like a 1-of in an aggressive deck, and I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 across both categories. I think it's pretty strong. Moving along, we have the 0-mana spell, Lightning Bloom. I think this card is very, very powerful, probably more powerful in Druid, but still definitely a threat in Shaman, and I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 in terms of card quality, and a 3 out of 5 in terms of meta relevance. I think if there is a good Shaman deck, it will absolutely run this card, and it is quite strong. Last but not least, we have Diligent Note Taker. This is a 2-mana 2/3 with Spell Burst. Return the spell to your hand. I think this is actually a very, very strong card. I think you could comfortably play this again on 2 against certain decks and not have it get punished. And I think against other decks, you might use it to combo stuff like Rockbiter Weapon or other spells where like having 1 extra might be what pushes you over the edge to kill your opponent. I think it's just a very, very solid card, and I would give it a 4 out of 5 in terms of overall card quality and a 3 out of 5 in terms of meta relevance. I think it's quite good. Alright guys, that's it for Shaman. Next up, we're going to be doing Warlock. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time.